story of Adam and Jill began 10 years ago. Various twists and turns led them through the challenges of infertility and toward the path of adoption. Now, with Jake and Gabby, their story begins a new chapter with a whole new cast of characters. Please welcome Adam and Jill Robb presenting The Intersection of Stories, an Adoption Journey.
We are Adam and Jill Robb, now known as the parents of Jake and Gabby. Both of us are teachers in the Mound Ridge School District, both graduates of Bethel College. We met as staffers at Camp Menascot roughly 14 years ago. We've now been married, often happily, for nearly 10 years. Roughly 35 years ago, my part of this story began. My parents, in the back of the room, Jim and Beatty, were looking to add to their family, and through the world of adoption, I became part of their story. Born in Lyons, but growing up in Newton, I always knew I was adopted, but never felt anything other than loved as I grew up in the only family I've ever known.
I was born and raised into a family that consisted of a hardworking mom and an honorary older brother. The memories I have of my childhood are good memories, memories that consist of trips to the park and going to parades. My mom made sure that we had the best of everything, even if it meant that mom went without. In the spring of 2012, we became pleasantly surprised to find out we were pregnant. Adam and I spent 2 weeks surprised and shocked. Yes, we know how it happened, but we couldn't believe how seemingly easy it was. Adam later admitted he was scared while I was elated. Unfortunately, after 2 weeks of being pregnant, our reality became very apparent and we would not be meeting our baby. A year later, in the spring of 2013, and after a year of trying to get pregnant, we found out we were pregnant again. But it was after miscarrying our baby that a seed of doubt was planted that something might be wrong with my body. After the loss of our 2 babies, we decided to plant the bush and to honor our daughter and an apple tree to honor our son.
After struggling with the miscarriages and working to discern what to do next, we turned to the world of reproductive medicine. Our local option was the Center for Reproductive Medicine in Wichita. We used them for 5 intrauterine inseminations, or IUIs, and an IVF, each time trudging to Wichita for blood work, sperm harvesting, or exams.
The IVF process was not only hard on my body, but also for my spirit. Difficult to answer ethical questions, countless shots administered by Nurse Adam, frequent clinical checks of my hormone levels, and eager anticipation all culminated with a disappointing result. The IVF process was unsuccessful. We decided to try one last IUI. When that didn't work, we were left with what to discern of the steps next. We waited until after the school year busyness to settle down before we took time to seriously look into adoption, something that had been on our hearts since the beginning of our marriage. We began asking others who adopted about lawyers or agencies they used. Before we applied to an agency, we completed our home study in hopes that we would be able to move the adoption process along faster.
With our home study completed, we chose Zoe's House Adoption Agency in Kansas City, mostly due to the way they seem to work with adoptive families and birth mothers. We were on the waiting list. While on the waiting list, we were shown to a possible birth family, but were not selected. We were devastated, but knew that since we weren't active, we were just beginning. At this same time, unborn Jake and Gabby, unbeknownst to us, were just entering the adoption process. In the summer of 2017, we became active, were shown, all over the course of 3 days. We knew it was twins, we knew there was drug use, and we knew our answer was yes.
Our profile was being shown the weekend before we headed out to our much beloved camp. We would actually be meeting the social worker we had been working with at Zoe's house. Her daughter would be a camper, and I just prayed the result of our profile being shown would not make it awkward. After constantly checking email and phone messages for any kind of news on Monday, we finally received the news that evening. We were matched. Our reactions to this amazing news definitely reflects on our personalities.
The generosity of so many people was and is not lost on us as we began to prepare our small home for the twins. Baby showers thrown by friends and family were very welcomed as we wrapped our heads around the awaiting adventure. We quickly became organization experts on how to fit the necessities for 2 newborns into our 1,500 square foot house. Cleaning took on a whole new meaning.
As we prepared our home, we also prepared our hearts to build a relationship with our birth mother. This proved to be quite a challenge, as it quickly became evident our life backgrounds varied differently from hers. She didn't understand our style of communication, while we found ourselves at times quite frustrated with hers. Topics thought by us to be very clear were found to be very confusing for her. What can I say other than this day was simply amazing, Jake and Gabby's birthday. On our way to the hospital, Adam looked over at me and said, "If I poked your face, it looked like it would burst. No offense." None taken. This was the day we had been waiting for a long time. The day at times seemed to drag. But then it was go time. Jake and Gabby arrived between 3:15 and 3:30 on September 12th.
From birth, Gabby was ready to rock. She was discharged a couple of days later. Jake was struggling to feed. We were admitted to the NICU, where after several days of trial and error, we landed on a surgical procedure to put in a feeding tube. After a week of recovery and 3.5 total weeks in the hospital, this crazy bunch could finally go home. We then had to wait for finalization, hoping that nothing fell through. We had 1 date, and then a second, November 8th. We drove to Kansas City, hoping that neither of the 2 possible birth fathers would show up. They didn't, but the judge did, and he said they were ours, with a no-return policy.
We were still working on maintaining a relationship with our birth mom. We had made several trips for Jake and Gabby to see her, and then our next trip is planned in a month. At times we found it to be rocky, still working on the communication piece. But as adoptive parents, we feel it is very important to maintain this relationship for Jake and Gabby, as they have, so they have a much better understanding of the why when they are older.
We are still adjusting to a new normal, one that will always change. Jake still has plenty of appointments to go to, but that is improving. Gabby, back in the hallway, is exactly what her name implies, and getting Gabbier every day. And our story is still being written as the Robb Party of 4 and more.